Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Unfair Advantage podcast. Today, I am joined by the one and only Frank Keck from CoreBuild. CoreBuild helps organizations thrive by enhancing communication, self-awareness, and collaboration. Frank is a seasoned leadership expert with over 10,000 hours of facilitation. He empowers leaders and teams to achieve clarity and success. He uses humor and thought provoking questions to inspire growth. Frank is also writing a new book, Four is Greater Than Two, about his journey from a victim mindset to one of love and joy. But before we dive in, let's not forget that today's episode is sponsored by Screaming Cow Marketing Group, which is your full service home service marketing agency that helps home service businesses around the US grow their business through utterly unforgettable marketing experiences. So if your business is looking for more of the right work to do, call the guys who move. Frank, welcome on.
Thanks, Brad. I love the screaming cow utterly. I love that.
It's I can't take all the credit. I love using Chat GPT and AI, and when we were doing this, I'm like, write me an intro type thing, but make sure you use like the branding of the cows and all that stuff. So full credit to OpenAI and Chat GPT and their team for helping us create that. But I always try to use the I guess the play on the cow branding as much as possible. So.
I like that. I think it'll really move people.
Yes, it will. And what we all say is we also like to help you milk more leads. Or if I'm doing like in-person networking, you didn't notice during the intro, a few little pauses and everything. I have a slight stutter. And so what helps me a lot of times when I get up and talk in front of people is if I just like do something weird or funny. So I'll get up and I'll go moo, and then I'll just kind of go into like what I'm doing. And so anybody who's like knows me and has been seeing that, they all moo back at me, and then everybody else in the room is new. They're like, "What is this guy mooing for?" And then they hear the company name, and they're like, "Ah, okay, it makes sense." So.
I love that. I love
But
that.
yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of like what you do and everything like that. So I mentioned CoreBuild in the intro, but why don't you give everybody a little bit about what it is and how you got to it?
So CoreBuild is a company that I founded several years ago in 2001 because I didn't want to work for somebody else. And I just wanted to help people to be the best version of themselves because that's what I've always struggled with. Who am I? What's the purpose in my life? What talent do I have? How do I not just have a boring life that doesn't matter? Right. So, how do I
Yep.
have a life that matters? And so I started off as a speaker. Well, I wanted to do stand-up comedy, but my dad said, "You're not funny, so try something else." So thanks, Dad.
Yep.
And so I started as a speaker in 2001 and just did workshops and seminars, and then went out on my own a few years later, started CoreBuild, and wrote my first book called Embrace Your Freakness. And
Okay.
it was really my journey to that point of who am I and what makes me unique. And I met Patch Adams at an airport in Washington, D.C. I didn't know it was Patch Adams at the time. And so I just sat and talked to him a little bit. And he was talking about you have to embrace what makes you unique. And I said, well, I think you go beyond that. I think you embrace your freakness. And he said, wow, that's great. Write it down. And I didn't even know what I'd said. So I had to have him repeat it back to me. Well, then I started telling people about that story. Then
Mm-hmm.
that became a keynote. Then it became my signature keynote. Then it became a book, right? Then it became a workshop. And then it kind of morphed into I was seeing lives change from the Embrace Your Frequency experience, which is really cool. And then I had business owners go through it and they said, hey, this was great for me personally. Do you think that you could have my team go through it? And could we transform our team? And so we started doing that. And then the whole culture revolution took off. And then COVID hit, which gave me about a year and a half to kind of think about what I wanted to do. And I thought, I want to refocus on helping people and teams, helping businesses become more profitable, right? So that they can sustain and help more people. But I want to help people become more valuable.
Right.
And, as your people become more valuable, your business becomes more valuable and it becomes more profitable. The people feel better about themselves. They can do more, right? And so they have more ownership of their own life, which is, and so that's kind of the long way to get to this journey I've been on recently. So the whole four is greater than two. As I went through a divorce, I thought, man, why is this happening to me? And one day my coach said, well, maybe it's not happening to you. Maybe it's happening for you. And I'd had a victim mindset my whole life. And it was just kind of like stars went off, right? And the angels started singing. And I was like, wait a minute. Yeah, because my life is infinitely better now than
Mm-hmm.
when I was married, because I was a victim that whole time, right? And so now I take ownership for my life, and I'm much happier, and my kids are happier. My ex, I think, is happier. So it's just, but it's what I realized was things don't happen to you; they happen for you. It's all about your mindset,
Yep.
and so that's what the book is going to be about: is my journey in going from an absolute victim mindset 100% of the time to how do I now own my life and make it work for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I what's ironic about that is I was just talking with a member of my team yesterday, and um, she's going through some things right now, and I kind of like went through that same, in a way, kind of I would say that same exercise where I kind of walked her through. We were hopping on a call to like for our Q3 planning and all that stuff. I was
Mm-hmm.
I, I was late this quarter, did not do it till after the quarter began, but we're going through and we're like, I could just tell that's like something was up. And so I'm like, let's put business aside. Let's talk personal real quick. And I kind of told her about like my past and everything. And I was like, if it wasn't for the fact that like this thing happened and this thing happened, and you look at how chess was being played in a way, like you would not be like, I would not be where I'm at today. And so it kind
Right.
of sounds like that's a little bit what happened with you and what you went through is, and I like the concept didn't happen like to you, it happened for you. But I
Mm-hmm.
also would add it happened through you as well.
Yeah.
Because there are probably other changes in either your life or others people's lives that wouldn't have happened if this didn't happen through you. So
Yeah, 100%. And so that's really my goal: is how can I help other people to not be me, but to own their own life? And so you're absolutely right. That will go through me. I'm kind of that conductor, if you will, which is cool, and which
yeah,
is that's where I've gotten the most joy in the last 24 years of working on my own, is just seeing people grow, right, and seeing people change in front of your eyes, and have the realization of, oh my gosh, I can have a happy life. I
yep,
can be in a good relationship. I
yep,
don't have to stay with this one. And it's, I think it's just a mindset that I was doing I love to read now, and or actually listen to audiobooks as I walk. And I was listening to a book called Grit, and it just kind of talked about, we're as little kids, we are humans are fear based to protect yourself. So like all throughout history, like the caveman and so on,
mm-hmm,
you had to be fear based so you didn't get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger, right? And so
yep,
that's in our DNA. But as we're evolving, we want to become more focused on love and creation and that kind of thing, and not necessarily so much on fear based. So we come by it naturally.
yeah,
And that's why we all have it, but it's at some point you have to say, hey, I think I want to move more towards having the life that I want, rather than having life kind of dictated for
right,
me.
yeah. And I think it also comes down to a lot of like how we were raised in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very thankful to come from a family where I like looking back and even now, like I feel like I came from a very healthy household. But like one of the things that like my mom is notorious for is like talking about the optics of this, or be careful if you do this, or and it's like those subtle comments over time got to a point
Right.
where like when I left, when I closed down my last business and then went to go work this full-time job, and then I had to go out and buy a vehicle and everything, I just hearing this in my mind of like the optics of this, you just lost all this, this money of your investors, family members being one, this and that. And ultimately like that kind of caused some of that fear mindset in me as well. And it was like out of no harm of the
Mm-hmm.
people who help grow you and mentor you. But that's one thing my wife and I are expecting our first in the year. And we've talked about like, okay, when we get to the point where, our kid is able to then like listen and like actually engage in conversations and understand what's right from wrong. It's not like, if they want a toy as an example, it's not, like, no, we don't have the money for that, or no, we're just not going to get that. It's no, you didn't earn that. Like you didn't work towards earning that.
Right.
And kind of this same thing there of like not going into the mindset of like making our kids feel fearful of things in life just by subtle comments that nobody realizes and kind of cause some of that fear-based mindset as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You remind me, as I was a kid growing up, and our parents loved us, and we grew up in a love based family, and my parents did the best they could, but they just didn't know. So, like, I remember two things in particular. My mom used to say to all four of us kids, "Well, shame on you," right?
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't mean to destroy our self confidence with
Right.
that, but she was basically lumping all this, saying, "Oh, well, you should be ashamed of yourself, right? You should take all that shame and put it on yourself."
Yep.
And so, like, part of my book is understanding the different levels. Every emotion has its own energetic charge, and so there's the Hawkins scale is actually measured the energy from all the different emotions. Well, shame is like the very bottom of the scale. So when you have shame on you, you literally have no energy to move forward. You're completely focused on survival, right? You're in the fight, flight, or freeze mode.
Yep.
And so there's no way you could like lead other people or do something creative. You just want to live to your next breath.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she didn't mean all that, right? She just didn't know any better, and it was just something that she would say. And then I remember my dad would say, you'd start crying, and my dad would say, "Stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about." And I remember wanting to say, "I have something to cry about.
Yep.
That's why I'm crying," right? But again, they just didn't really, they didn't understand neuroscience like we do today. They didn't understand emotions like we do today. And so it's, kind of giving your parents a break, right?
Yep.
And congratulations on having your first baby. It
Thank you.
never goes like you think it's going to go.
That is what I'm being told. So, and actually, that I'd say the first, I don't even know how far along she is, 16, 17 weeks at this point. It's been what we thought it was going to be. The first 16 weeks of the pregnancy have not gone as we had thought. So definitely getting an early taste of that. So.
Yeah, and kids are really wonderful, and one of the reasons that I wanted to do this book now, and I'm so grateful I went through what I went through now, is your kids pay attention to what you do far more than what you say, right? And my kids
Mm-hmm.
are teenagers now, so they listen to me pretty well for teenagers. But teenagers, just they're kind of at that stage where it's like, okay, I'm an adult. Well, you're not really an adult, but you have an adult mindset. And so you want to go out on your own. You think you're smarter
Right.
than your parents. But our job is to help them to kind of think through stuff, kind of like you were talking about. But they learn from what we do. And so if I live my life as a victim, what my coach helped me realize is you're teaching your children to be victims,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you're not letting them have the best opportunity to have an incredible life.
Yeah.
And as soon as he said that, I was like, oh man, I gotta nip this in the bud,
Yeah.
right? And so just the things that we learn, and so like all these opportunities that you've had with these different businesses, like that's what life is. It's like, okay, I'm going to go through this. I'm going to learn from it. I saw in a startup office here in Kansas City a sign that said "fail" on the wall, and "fail" stands for first attempt in learning, right? And that's always stuck with me because I'm like, you know what? Life is a startup, and
Mm-hmm.
you're trying different things. You see what works, And it's like, I can look at it and go, okay, well, that happened to me, right? And I lost my money on that, or the business didn't work. Or you can say, well, gosh, look at all the stuff I learned from that.
Yep.
Like, I look at my marriage and I can say, well, it was a failed marriage. Well, in some ways, perhaps the way that society looks at it, like you married the same person for your whole life. But I look at it as, man, I learned a lot. I'm a better person. My ex is a better person. My kids are better people. I would say
Right.
that's a pretty win-win situation, right? And
Yep.
it just kind of depends on how you look at it. So,
Yeah.
um, but just taking that into account, your kids are going to pay attention to what you do, how you and your wife live your lives,
Mm-hmm.
how you guys treat each other. And so it'll be fun talking to you in about a year.
Yep.
And
I'll be like, Frank, I can't do this, Bob. No, I'm kidding.
no, but what's really amazing, Brad, and I think this kind of goes back to people in general, is like for my kids, it's amazing how much they like I remember when we had our first son, Leo, like he just started crawling. Like, I didn't show him any videos on YouTube. I didn't buy him any books to read. Like, he just figured it out, right? Same with talking. He just started talking one day. He's never stopped. But like, they just figure stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so amazing if we just support people and give them a little encouragement. It's amazing what human beings can do. And
Yeah.
that's what I get excited about what I'm doing. I'm excited about what you're doing and the whole premise of this podcast, right? It's like, hey, whoever's listening, we just want to encourage you, give you some ideas and help you along your way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a lot of where this podcast came from, was out of the aspect of like what I've been through. It was like, that is my unfair advantage, and has what has now gotten me to this. Like, there are thousands and thousands of people in the US alone who stutter, and it's like they don't even go out, and like, I'm in all these feeds on like Reddit and everything, and they're like, I can't go out on a first date with a girl because of this, and I'm like, I don't give a crap about it. I rock with it. I roll with it and just keep going. And like, because of that determination to like prove that wrong, like that's part of the
Right.
reason why I launched a podcast. And then like the failure of my business is what has helped contribute to some of the quick success in the business I have now. And then there's been some learning lessons and failures, I'd say, within this business that early on that have now contributed to some of the pivots we've made and adjustments we've made and everything like that. And it's like, if you are in that victim mindset, you won't be in this constant phase of trying to grow and better yourself and the people around you. You're just going to be kept caught into like the past and not into like what the future could be.
Absolutely. As you reminded me, as I'm doing my walking last summer, I was just listening to different little videos, looking for something to listen to while I walked on YouTube, and I like to listen to Jocko Willink, who's a retired Navy SEAL,
Okay.
and I just listen to him and he'd just yell at me, right? And so I would walk faster. But one of the things I discovered is to get out of a victim mindset, to get out of fear and depression and guilt and shame. The only way out, you have to go up the energy scale, and the next energy up from that is anger, right? And so I used anger, and it literally lifted me out of the doldrums. And so that's going to be part of the book is, anger is an action emotion, and it can be very powerful. But like our parents told us, oh, you shouldn't be angry.
Yep.
Well, anger used in the right way is very powerful. But where I'm going with this is I started listening to David Goggins. I don't know
Okay.
if you're familiar
Yep.
with David Goggins. He is an insane human being. He runs ultra marathons. He did 4,000 pull-ups in 24 hours. I think I can do probably 3, right?
I think I can do
But
one.
yeah, but Goggins talks about, on one of the videos I was listening to, he too stutters.
Yep.
And he said, I used that not to keep me from talking because I have a powerful message. He said, but that encouraged me to just go out and do it, and that's not going to stop me, right? And that's that whole 4 mentality, right? The stutter worked for him to make
Mm-hmm.
him stronger. And he uses anger and pain to work for him,
Yep.
to push him more towards what he wants to accomplish, as opposed to, oh gosh, I stutter, so I can't, I just have to go sit in my room by myself. So I
Yeah.
love the fact that you're out doing this. It's that same mindset, right? Hey, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to make this work for me. And it's not working against me.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I like to do in this is I always like to kind of tie things back to like a unfair advantage. So we're kind of talking about that victim mindset and everything. But I always think about you have the concept of like you have your why, like why you do things. My wife, like those different things. But then you have like your burn, and that's really what like keeps you going, what drives you. And so, um, are you comfortable with sharing a little bit? Like,
Yeah.
do you know what contributed to that early on, like victim mindset? Because I like to say, like, it's those things that if that didn't happen in your life, you wouldn't have had the domino effect that then have led you to the point now where you're in a way through what you're doing is you're also coaching other people in these organizations how to not have that victim mindset.
Yeah. I think there's, the unfair advantage I had is, victimization was, there's a long lineage of it in my family. And so when I was 18 months old, my parents had a baby that died a day after she was born. And so my mom went into this funk. I mean, I didn't know about it because she would never talk about it. So I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know about it until my own daughter was born 50 years later. But she told me, she said, I went into a funk. I couldn't really handle you or your sister, right? So that was their third baby. So she went into a depression for a long time. Well, that made me feel like, oh man, I've done something to my mom. I must not be worthy.
Right.
And so I carried that around for a long time. And then, and so that just, like, all these things would happen to me because I had that victim mindset. But then I met this friend of mine. He's now a good friend of mine. And I met him at a networking event. And we sat down, we went out for coffee a couple days later, and we're sitting there talking. We're in Panera, right? Panera Bread on Metcalf at 435, if you remember that, in Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
And we're sitting there talking, and about 15 minutes into it, right? And I've never met this man before except at this networking thing. 15 minutes into our first coffee, and he looks me in the eye and he said, you were sexually abused as a child, weren't you? And I thought, well, how could you possibly know that? So I said, how could you possibly know that? And he said, you have all the telltale signs. And it was at that moment I knew I've not told anybody for 50 years. I've hidden it. It's impacted me in a negative way. I've always felt like I didn't have the right to be me. I've always felt like I wasn't worthy as a human being, right? Because if you were worthy as a human being, stuff like that wouldn't happen to you.
Right.
And so it was kind of a two-parter, right? So it was the sister dying, and that was the being abused for a long time as a child. But then it wasn't until this person, Jeff, who's now my friend, said, you were abused as a kid. And it was at that moment that I knew I had to change. And so I started seeing a therapist, right? And so that started helping things. But to get me to where I am today, had I not come home one day and my wife said, I'm in love with somebody else, I don't want to be married to you anymore. Had I not gone through that, and my first reaction was, well, I'm a victim. How can this happen to me? I'll do whatever you want. I'll make it right. But going through all this stuff, I realized, wait a minute, just because she decides that she needs to go do something else, doesn't mean that I'm a bad person, doesn't mean that I'm a victim.
Right.
And so I went through a year and a half of really hard work, through coaching, through classes, a lot of self-examination, just to kind of dig in and go, oh, you know what? I could really, I could let this destroy me, or I can let this make me stronger. And it's all up to me. I
Yeah.
get to choose how I want my life to be. And I had a mentor a long time ago tell me, you can't control what happens to you, only how you respond. But that really didn't sink in until, like, okay, all of a sudden, here's this opportunity, right? Now you're faced with divorce.
Right.
And now what are you going to do with it? And so I kind of rededicated my life. But it was like, okay, I've got to start taking care of Frank, because if I don't take care of me first, how am I going to support other people? How am I going to
Right.
support my kids? Like, what message is that sent to my kids if I let something like that destroy them?
Yeah.
So, so I think it really turned into be a huge blessing. It didn't feel that way at first.
Right.
It took a lot of again, self-examination, looking at the hard stuff. But as I worked through those different emotions, and I just decided, you know what? I'm tired of being a victim. I'm tired of feeling horrible. I'm tired of being depressed. I'm tired of thinking about, gosh, maybe I should just end it. I'm tired of always being sad or angry. I was angry all the time. And since I've gone through this revolution, it's the coolest thing, Brad. I don't get mad anymore.
Yeah.
Like, because you choose the emotion first, right? So people, like, I hear people all the time go, "Oh, well, if I could have this, I would just, if I just need this and I'll be happy." And what I learned is, why don't you just decide to be happy first,
Yeah.
right? And then the stuff that supports that will come into your life. And so I
Yeah.
think we sometimes have it backwards. And I thought, if I just marry Rachel, my life will be fine, right? I'll like myself, because I didn't love myself for a long time. She didn't help me love myself, right? Because she couldn't.
Right.
That had to come from me. So until I was given that opportunity to go with, okay, you're not going to be married anymore, that was really that part that triggered me to go, all right, it's time to make some changes.
Yeah.
And that was a huge blessing.
Well, first, thank you for kind of going through all of that. I know a lot of times kind of sharing history and past and everything, especially when not everybody knows about it, can be difficult. But that's one of the things that, in a way, I don't know if this is the right verbiage that I'm going to use, but it's in a way kind of what lights me about doing this podcast is, like, I've had people come up here and come on here, and, like, we hopped off and they're like, that's the first time I've ever talked about this. And it's been a platform for people to help share what they've been through and hopefully help others go through
Mm-hmm.
exactly that are going through exactly what they've gone through. So, um, I want to kind of transition, if you don't mind, and
Sure.
kind of piggybacking in a way off of the victim mindset and everything. So, when people are going through your core build program and, like, what you do, I imagine getting them out of that victim mindset is a lot of what goes into that. But when people are working for you, like, what would you say, like, how you measure success in your program, like how it impacts not only them but also their company as well?
I think it really depends on what they see success being. And so one of the things we start off with is we ask people to define, what is your vision of success? What does success look like? So what does success look like in your life? What does it look like in your job? If you're doing a core build program, what does success look like in this program? What would have to happen for you to go, wow, that was the greatest thing I ever did? What would have to happen for you to go, okay, that was pretty good, right? So
Yeah.
just to get people to start thinking about that. And what I've learned through the years, Brad, is when you ask people, what's your vision of success? Most people have never thought about it. And so most people don't really have an answer. And they're like, oh, I don't know. I haven't really thought. I guess hitting goals.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, awesome. Do you have any goals? No, I don't have any goals. Right. And so I think there's just a lot of people who just kind of meander through life because they don't really know what success looks like. But to add to that, if I may, so
Yeah.
one of the most powerful things that I kind of discovered, and you and I have a mutual friend, Jessica Powell, and Jessica took me to this workshop one time, and they were talking about mindset and some of these things. And when we got done, I sat down and just wrote down some things that I had learned. And I have ADD, and so I have to have processes. And so I said, I've got to have a process when I get into a mind funk, right? So if I get depressed or I get um, guilt, I feel guilty or shameful or any of those low energy emotions, which we call force emotions from the book Power versus Force. You get into one of those low level emotions. How do I pull myself out? So if I may, I'd just like to share, I
Yeah.
created this process and I call it an upward spiral, right? We've all heard of a downward
Right.
spiral, but this is actually an upward spiral. And so the first thing is you just acknowledge what emotion am I feeling right now. And so, like on my wall, right behind my computer, I have a feelings wheel. I don't know how many feelings are on there. There's a whole bunch. It's a whole circle and it's full of different emotions. So I can just look at that and say, okay, the emotion I'm feeling now is right. And so let's just say that I start off and I'm feeling angry for whatever reason, right? So that I would say the feeling that I'm feeling now is anger, and that's all mine, and I own it, and I'm okay with it. And so the first thing is just too often we fight the emotion that we're in, and that just makes it worse, right? So an emotion can only last 5 to 90 seconds on its own. It's just a short burst of energy unless you feed it. And so when you resist something, that makes it stronger because you're feeding that energy into it. So just accept it and take several deep breaths. So I'll take 3 or 4 deep breaths. Okay, I'm okay with that. Then you ask yourself that same question. What emotion am I feeling now? And I go back to my emotion wheel and I say, okay, well, I'm feeling, and I'm actually going through this now, I'm feeling peace. Okay, I'm feeling peace. That's my emotion. I'm okay with that. And just again, just accept it, do 3 or 4 breaths, then do the same thing, right? What emotion am I feeling now? I'm feeling unstoppable love, right? I want to go do something really cool. And I'm okay with that. That's my emotion and I own that. And so I do that. That typically takes, I don't know, maybe 60 seconds, 2 minutes. And then the last part of it is, what are 3 things I'm grateful for right now? I'm grateful for my new friend, Brad, right? And this wonderful podcast and the people that he's reaching out to. I'm grateful that I can share my story, that I've been through it and that I can share it with people. And I'm grateful for my children and just the fact that they get to learn a lot of really cool stuff at young ages, right? So just 3 things that you're grateful for, and that will instantly put you up in a higher state of consciousness or a higher state of emotional being. And so now it's like, all right, so whatever negative emotional state I was in, within 2 minutes, I can change that emotional state and feel pretty good about going forward now and doing something different.
That's awesome. There's as you're walking through that, I was thinking through a recent thing that I was going through, and it was like when you talk about the 5 to 20 seconds, like that's really how long it lasts, and then it feeds after that. I was thinking about it. I'm like, I definitely let that feed on a little bit longer, not a little bit, a lot longer than like that 5 to 20 seconds in there. So that is a great exercise to walk through.
Have you ever like just been, I used to get angry all the time and somebody I think it was my grandfather taught me, he said, just tell yourself how long you're going to be angry for and just say, okay, I'm going to be angry for 15 minutes and then I'll be all right. Right. And again, you're
Yeah.
planting a seed in your subconscious and 15 minutes later, like almost to the minute, instantly the anger goes away.
Yep.
Right. So it's so cool. The amount of stuff I've learned writing this book about the subconscious mind and how the brain actually works. It's an amazing vehicle,
Yeah.
our human brain.
Yeah, it's interesting you ask that because I do it in select situations. I always joke and say that like my wife is like the forgotten co-founder in a way. Like she's behind the scenes, has to deal with things from the business, and sometimes is involved in choices that are made for the business, even though like she's not like in a leadership role in the business, all that stuff. And there's times where like she can just tell like I'm irritated, there's something going on, and I just say to her like, hey, I just need to go into my office for 10 minutes, I need to go on a walk for 10 minutes, I just
Yeah.
need 10 minutes of like no questions, everything, and just trust when I get back like things are going to be good, and like just don't ask. And it took her a while to get to the point of not asking, because then I'd come back and be fine. She'd be like, so what was wrong? And I'm like, just if I go into that 10 minutes of peace, like, and I, or 10 minutes of anger or whatever that emotion is, and I come out feeling peace, like, just leave it at that and don't poke the bear at that point. So as you're talking, I'm like, I do, I didn't even realize that was something I did, but I
Yeah.
only do it in one, like, it only happens when it has to do things with the business. Like, if there's other things that go on, like, I don't do that. So, I'm going to definitely be trying to implement that in other areas of life too. So,
The other thing I'd like to share, because I
yeah.
think it kind of goes along, and I wouldn't be surprised if you're doing this too. It's called anchoring, which is a neuro linguistic programming tool. But you take a physical movement, right? So like I squeeze my fists together because I typically do that when I go walking. So I'll squeeze my fists together. Well, when I do that, I've anchored unstoppable joy to that, right? So I think about what is some event in my life where I had unstoppable joy, right? And I remember the birth of my son Leo, like when he popped out, there's just it was the most amazing thing ever. Like I'm excited when you guys have your baby. It is the most, maybe not quite so incredible for the woman because she doesn't get to see it, but seeing the baby come out, it's just the most amazing thing. And so I anchored that energetic state, that moment, right? And so you think about that moment, you relive it, and then you tie that to a physical movement. So mine is squeezing of my fists. You do that repeatedly about 40 times, and then it will create a neural pathway in your brain. And so it's kind of like Pavlov's dogs, right? If you remember Pavlov and his dogs,
Mm-hmm.
they would shock the dog and make it salivate, or give it the treat, make it salivate, right? And then after a while, they could uh, just shock him and he would salivate. So it's the same thing. You build the neural pathway. Well, now when I do this and squeeze my fists together, I don't have to like stop and think about something. It instantly takes me to that energetic state. So like
Okay.
before you, if you have to do brainstorming or you got to do coaching with somebody on your team, you can just anchor like what emotional state do you want to be in? Like I want to be in peace, right? Or I want to be in joy, or I want to be in love, or I want to be in creativity if you're going to do brainstorming. So just anchor creativity. Think about a time when you really had that going on. You can anchor that moment to a physical movement. Now, before you start that creative session or whatever it is, you put yourself in the mindset first. Now you're ready to go.
Wow. That I'm gonna as you're going through that, I'm like thinking of like, okay, which moment of joy do I go through? And then I'm sitting here, I'm like, do I just wait till the end of the year and just use that as as the moment of joy? So, but well, Frank, this has been awesome hopping on here and still talking through everything. I always like to end these with kind of like, what is a key message that you could share with people? So, like anybody who's gone through what you've gone through, they're going through that victim mindset. If there was like one thing that you're like, if they could forget anything else I said in this podcast episode except for this would be that.
I think the biggest thing I can leave you with is four is greater than two. Things aren't happening to you, they're happening for you. Four, the number four, is much bigger and much greater than the number two. Four is greater than two. And so if you think about things such as, I'm fortunate, right? I have fortitude. I always want to move forward. So just remember, four is greater than two. No matter what you're going through, at some point you can look back, and almost everything that happens to you, you can look back and go, man, I'm so glad that happened because I learned something from it. So four is greater than two. It's all how you look at it.
Wow, that is awesome. For our listeners, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review so we can continue to produce more episodes like this and continue to share stories like Frank on our platform. If you're also online on platforms like Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn, please share this episodes and tag our guest so he can get more exposure for what he's doing at CoreBuild and share what he's gone through in his life. But until next time, this is the Unfair Advantage.